Oh my goodness, I am the worst at. So I don't know why, but I'm the worst at being on time with these streams. I say it's 8 o'clock. I get everything. I'm in here. I have everything I think ready, and then as soon as I start hitting buttons to go live, things start screwing up. I just want to copy this and test it out in a new window because YouTube is trying to tell me that 1080p is not ideal for streaming, and I have no idea why it would not be ideal for streaming. That's an ad blasting in your all's ears because apparently I'm hitting all the viewers with ads. Yeah. It looks... Okay. So maybe YouTube forces it down to 1080p because that's what it's showing here on my other tab. Not even an option to have the 1080p. But it's already started. I feel like it's going to be okay. And I'm just going to leave it because undoing it would be more of a pain than anything. Because once you've started the stream, if I end it, then I have to like create a whole new thing and restart it. And it's a whole pain. And anyways, welcome. It is my weekly 107 stream. That's right. This is a weekly stream. You guys might not be aware because it does go on primarily through Patreon. This is one of the things that I'm doing to pay the bills. So if you're interested in getting your 107 certificate and you would like for me to teach you all of the material to pass your 107 written exam, then hit me up because actually you can just go to the link in the description to Patreon and sign up. It's $50 a month. The whole premise is that you should be able to knock it out in 1 month. All of the backlog of streams are available to my patrons at the 107 level, and weekly we get together and do a stream. While it's only the second stream that I've done to my entire YouTube audience, this will be the end of all of the material that is in part of the Airman certification standards for Part 107 certification. So after tonight's stream, there will be a back catalog of all the material, so you could just go and binge watch in one day, and then in theory go and take your written exam the next day. I would recommend doing some practice tests before going and doing that personally, but you'll have somebody that can explain all the material to you, and then weekly live streams that you would have access to where you can ask me any questions, and if I don't know the answer off the top of my head, I will go and find it for you and help you out. So that's awesome. Glad to hear you're interested, Wicked Sticks. Check out that link in the description and go hit it up. And also there's a Discord. All the people that are signed up on Patreon can participate in the voice chat, stop me anytime during the presentation, ask questions, all of that good stuff. So tonight's stream is a lot of people would find this to be kind of boring. I used to have to do a lot of aeronautical decision making and crew resource management classes when I worked at the airlines. I used to be an airline pilot, and a lot of the pilots find that stuff to be really boring, and I can kind of see the point, but I also think that it's super useful. It's one of the most useful aspects of the 107 test prep, in my opinion, to the day-to-day flying of FPV, because it just, while we do a lot of this decision-making processes automatically and we don't really think about it, we'll talk about differences between analytical decision-making and automatic decision-making tonight. But while we make these decisions on a daily basis, it's good to take a step back and look at the big picture of all of the things that are going on, all of the inputs, all of the hazards and risks, and get a grasp on some of the better ways to handle all of those and analyze them as we're going and think about them in a productive way. So without any further ado, we're just going to dive right in. Now, tonight I'm going to start off in the same place that I start off every night, but then we're going to take a little bit of a left turn for those of you that are in on the 107 course, because up until now, I've just been kind of winging it, where I get everything ready for the night and we go through a bunch of browser tabs and all of that. But as of now, I have put together Google Slides presentations with all the material in one place. So we just click through and talk about the stuff nice and handy dandy and much more organized. And so as we repeat all this material in new streams, I will have the whole presentation put together in a nice orderly fashion. But first of all, before we get into that, we're going to consult with our handy dandy Airman certification standards. Now, you might be asking yourself, probably not, but you could be, what are the Airman certification standards? And this is the document that the FAA publishes that outlines what it is for any Airman certification, whether it's your small unmanned aircraft systems certification or remote pilot, what we call the 107 certificate, or it's private pilot, airline transport pilot. All of those have their own Airman certification standards published that outlines all of the knowledge that you have to have and all of the practical skills that you have to have. Now, for the remote pilot certification, there are no practical tests. Nobody makes you fly a drone and watches you fly it yet. So all of this is just knowledge based, but it has a good outline of all the information that you need to know and all of the information that could be asked on your 107 written exam. Now, this is broken down into several sections. And we've gone through all of this stuff. I think the other one that I did publicly was the airspace. That's regulations. We did that last week. Today, we're going to be doing... where are we at here? Aeronautical decision making and physiology. Now, as you can see, these two have... you have not only the knowledge section, the applicant demonstrates the understanding of, and all of these things that you need to know about, but also it has references. And all the information tonight I have pulled from these references that the FAA has laid out for us. There's lots of really good information out there, and, you know, it's handy. You just got to kind of know where to go and look. But let's jump right in. Boom. Look at that. Doesn't that look professional and everything? Unmanned aircraft system pilot certification. Whew. All right. I'm going to do my best. This is the first time that I've presented using these slides. So I'm going to do my best not to read from the slides, but just to talk about these things. There's a couple, a lot of the early stuff in the presentation has to do with physiology, and there's just not a ton extra that I can say about, like, hyperventilation, for instance. Hyperventilation is what it is. It's a lack of carbon dioxide in your system. And so, yeah, there may be a little bit of reading from the slides early on, but once we get into the aeronautical decision making and CRM stuff, I'm going to get a lot more talkative. All right, so let's just jump right in. First of all, we got, all right, I got to uncover things on this screen so that I'm not reading all. Health and physiological factors affecting the pilot performance. Now, as you can probably guess, if your body is not in good condition, you're not going to perform at your peak. So there's a lot of things, health and physiological factors that can be linked to your flying. Some of them are minor, but some of them could be major. Obviously, you wouldn't be wanting to fly if you're in the middle of having a heart attack. I don't know. That's like an extreme thing. But the important thing is to recognize that our physical health and our physical state has an effect on our ability to perform. Now, I gotta go back. There we go. Hyperventilation. We're right into it. Hyperventilation is an excessive rate and depth of breath or respiration that leads to an abnormal loss of carbon dioxide in the blood. It's something that happens very commonly with pilots, not just remote pilots, but full-scale pilots. If you find yourself in an emergency situation, you might start breathing too fast and not deep enough, building up or losing carbon dioxide from the blood. Now, it can cause a lot of disturbing symptoms. So pilots encountering the unexpected stressful situation may subconsciously increase their breathing rate. And if also flying at a higher altitude, like obviously this mentions with oxygen, but if you're like Mexico City, well, I was flying at 10 or 12,000 feet, and it could have been easier to get into a hyperventilation situation. All right, so common symptoms of hyperventilation. Visual impairment. Your vision starts to not get as great, could be blurry, etc. You could lose consciousness if you take it too far. A lightheaded or dizzy sensation, tingling, hot or cold, or muscle spasms. All right. Ways to treat hyperventilation. It's really simple. The best way to not only treat but also to prevent is to just use controlled breathing techniques, take long, deep breaths, and, breathe in, wait a second, breathe out. And that'll help you prevent and cure it. Another thing that can help is to talk aloud, just because that requires you to regulate your breathing. You can't just be if you're having to form words on every exhale. Breathing into a paper bag is also very helpful, because as you exhale carbon dioxide, into the bag, you breathe in the air from the bag, which has a higher concentration of carbon dioxide, helping you to build up that carbon dioxide in your system again. All right. Stress. Stress is the body's response to physical and psychological demands placed on it. Body's reaction to stress includes releasing chemical hormones such as adrenaline that can increase metabolism to provide more energy, but it's not all good. Types of stress. There's two main categories of stress. We have chronic and acute stress. Now, acute is short-term, chronic, long-term. Acute stresses are basically your immediate threats that trigger that fight or flight response. Like you about hit the wall. A hawk is trying to pull your quad out of the sky. Those would be acute forms of stress, whereas chronic are long-term. Now, a constant repeated acute stressors can lead to a chronic or long-term stress. Chronic stress can be defined as a level of stress that presents an intolerable burden. It exceeds the ability of the individual to cope and causes individual performance to fall sharply. Unrelenting pressures such as loneliness, financial worries, and relationship or work problems can produce a cumulative level of stress that exceeds a person's ability to cope with the situation. And when stress reaches those levels, the performance falls off rapidly. Obviously, if you are experiencing chronic stress, it is not a good time to be flying. All right. Fatigue. With fatigue, you have a degradation of attention and concentration, impaired coordination, and decreased ability to communicate. Now, not along with that, it can also seriously influence your ability to make decisions, which is one of the more dangerous aspects of it, because if you're not able to make good decisions, then how are you going to best deal with fatigue? It's kind of like this feedback loop, right? Now, there's two types of fatigue. Just like with stress, we have acute and chronic, and the differences between acute and chronic fatigue are much like that of stress. Acute fatigue would be something from like working too hard for the day, just a little bit short on sleep, maybe staying up too late. That would be considered acute fatigue, whereas and some other causes, mild hypoxia, the lack of oxygen. They talk a lot about hypoxia on the full scale stuff. You guys shouldn't get any questions about hypoxia because you're not leaving the ground. And you tend to get into a lack of oxygen at altitude. Oh man, these comments are killer. All right. Also, physical stress, psychological stress, depletion of physical energy, or sustained psychological stress. Those are all causes of acute fatigue. Good ways of preventing acute fatigue is just healthy diet, adequate rest, and also adequate exercise. If exercising on a regular basis will help you fight off that acute fatigue over time as well. Chronic fatigue, extending over a long period of time, usually has psychological roots, although an underlying disease is sometimes responsible. Basically, chronic fatigue is not relieved by just diet and rest. It's the sort of thing that you're going to have to go see a doctor about. It could be, from palpitations of the heart, all this stuff. Chronic fatigue is bad, and that's that ongoing in nature, not just, today. All right. These are a couple that I feel like really play into FPV, because when do we usually fly? We fly in the summer months a lot, out in the sun, in the heat, and a couple of things that we got to be aware of. One being dehydration. Dehydration is just the term given to a critical loss of water from the body. Causes could, see, it's got flight decks. I need to edit that out. The causes are from hot environments, lots of wind, humidity, also diuretic drinks like coffee, tea, alcohol, or soft drinks can all lead to dehydration. If you want to fight dehydration, the best way to do that is with water, like this guy. So some of the common signs: headache. If you ever have been out flying all day and start to get a headache, pound some water because chances are you're probably just dehydrated. Fatigue, cramps, sleepiness, dizziness. All right, so those are your signs. And yeah, these are all the things that are covered in 107. I'm going to apologize right now, guys. I may not do the best job of paying attention to the comments tonight just because there's a ton of material and I want to get through it all and have this up as a resource to people that are looking to get their 107, etc. I will take some comments later on. Why is it not clicking? There we go. And do like a little question and answer time near the end. All right. Preventing dehydration. In order to prevent the dehydration, a good way is to drink 2 to 4 quarts of water every day. But since everybody's different, it's kind of only a guide. Just make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. Some additional tips. If you carry a container that can help you keep track of your water, like one of those big, I have a big insulated bottle that I like to take out flying with me. But also try to stay ahead. Don't rely on just being thirsty to be your alarm. Another good tip is to maybe add something to your water. If you want like a little bit of that sports drink stuff, that the powder, because that'll make it sweeter, give you a tendency to just drink more of it. And limiting your daily intake of caffeine and alcohol, which both are diuretics and will cause you to be more likely to be dehydrated. All right. Heat stroke. This is another one, and I like to, we'll talk about that. Heat stroke is basically when your body loses the ability to regulate the temperature. You get so hot that your body can't cool you off just through perspiration and, just moving blood around, and it's really not good. A lot of the conditions can be... The condition can be recognized by the symptoms of dehydration, but it's also been known to become recognized only on complete collapse. I have had a heat stroke one time, and I would not recommend it. It is not fun. The best way to prevent it is to have an ample supply of water to carry and use it at frequent intervals. One thing that I like to say is, especially, I used to be I'm still not skinny by any means, but I used to be a little bit thicker, and it made it a lot harder for me to cool off in the summer. And what I would like to do is make sure that my water was nice and cold. I talked about that vacuum sealed little thermos thing. I would put ice in there, and I would have ice cold water to sip on. Or freeze a couple of water bottles and take like a frozen bottle of water and a thawed bottle of water, and then as the one that's frozen unfreezes, drink that water, and then pour more water on it, and you have a constant supply of ice water all day while you're out flying. Because putting that cold water in helps your body be able to cool off, essentially. You're just dumping cold stuff in. All right. Operations while impaired. Part 107 does not allow the operation of a SUAS. Real quick, that's a small unmanned aircraft system. If the remote PIC, person manipulating the controls, or visual observer is unable to safely carry out his or her duties. It's the PIC's responsibility to ensure that all crew members are not participating in the operation while impaired. While drug and alcohol use are known to impair judgment, certain over-the-counter medications and medical conditions could also affect the ability to safely operate. Now, one of the things that's very common is antihistamines. A lot of allergy medicines the FAA considers to impair judgment. So just be careful if you're on any medications to kind of look into that and make sure that it's not going to affect you in any way. Some other things to think about is, have you consumed alcoholic beverage within the preceding 8 hours? The FAA regulations, as we went over in the previous weeks, say that we have to go 8 hours from the time of the last drink until we fly. That's 8 hours from bottle to throttle, as the memory tool is. 8 hours bottle to throttle. Memorize that. Also, be sure that you're not under the influence of alcohol. Have a blood concentration of 0.04% or greater. That would be a reason not that you would be impaired. That's the other part of the alcohol regulations is it's half that of the legal limit. 0.04% is the legal limit for flying, not only full-scale planes, but also drones. All right. And also be sure that you're not using a drug that affects a person's mental or physical abilities. Now, alcohol. Alcohol obviously impairs the efficiency of the human body. Imagine that. Studies have shown that consuming alcohol is closely linked to performance deterioration. Pilots have to make hundreds of decisions a flight, and some of them are time critical during the course of that flight. Basically, this is saying alcohol is a depressant and it depresses your ability to react. It's not good stuff. Another thing to keep in mind is a hangover is technically still being drunk. While that 8 hours bottle to throttle should be good if you have like 1 or 2 beers with dinner, 8 hours is not going to be enough if you are engaging in binge drinking. You could stop drinking at the end of your night and 8 hours later still be well above the 0.04 percentage of blood alcohol concentration that is going to put you over the legal limit and make you not legal to fly. What up, Code Red? All right. Moving on. Oops. I always forget like what I'm clicking on and able to do it. Okay. Drugs. The federal aviation regulations include no specific references to medication, but there are a couple of regulations that are important to remember. 61.53 prohibits acting as pilot in command. If you are know or has reason to believe that a medical condition would make the person unable to meet the requirements for the medical certificate. Now, obviously, with the drones, we don't have a medical certificate, but it still applies. Or if you're taking a medication or receiving other treatment for a medical condition that results in the person being unable to meet the requirements for that. Okay. I feel like I shouldn't have included that because it's referring specifically to the medical certificate, but it still applies. Don't fly when there are drugs in your system that are going to affect it. This is just a little table of some over-the-counter medications and some of their possible side effects. Yes, nicotine has negative side effects. Amphetamines, antihistamines. The point is, be conscious of the possible side effects of any medication that you're currently taking. All right, now we're getting into the vision stuff. Now, with vision, there are 3 different types of vision. Our eyes, the retina consists of various cells that are able to sense light. We have both rods and cones. Cones are good at sensing colors, and we use them a lot in bright daylight situations. The rods are much better at just sensing overall light amplitude, not so much the hue, and the rods become a lot more active and are very good at night. Now, the center section of our vision mostly consists of these cones, and that's why during the daytime you're much easier to look at things directly and see them, whereas at night, where all of it our peripheral vision, which has a lot more rods, becomes more active, it can be beneficial to actually look off center from something to do a better job of keeping track of it. So if you were to be flying something, if you had your night waver and you're flying something line of sight at night, you could do well to not stare directly at it, but to look just slightly off to the side. Now, I say that as all just kind of back information. There's 3 main types of vision: photopic, mesopic, and scotopic. You're not going to get asked a ton of questions about these in particular, so I'm just going to kind of briefly go over it. The photopic, that's during the daylight hours. It's primarily using your cones, and our 20/20, it's very good at resolving fine detail like your 20/20 vision. The mesopic is during primarily used during twilight, where it's getting darker and darker. You're using both your cones and your rods, and as this is one of the more dangerous times for flying because your vision is kind of transitioning from that daytime viewing mode to nighttime viewing mode, and as the cone sensitivity decreases, you should start using more of that off-center vision for proper scanning techniques. All right. And scotopic. Scotopic is the nighttime. That is when The low light where the cones become ineffective, and your visual acuity during scotopic vision decreases. Even if you're 20/20 vision normally, you will go down to 20 by 200 or less. And what that means is that big E on the visual chart, that when you're testing from 20 feet away, you would only be able to see that from 20 feet, whereas normally somebody with 20/20 vision would be able to read that from 200 feet. Scotopic vision, color perception is lost, and a night blind spot in the central field of view appears at low light. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Now, this is a different thing from that center vision where you have all the cones that are concentrated in the center of your vision. The central blind spot is a little bit different. Right in the center of your retina, where the retinal nerve attaches to it, you have a complete lack of both rods and cones. So in the center of both eyes, you have a complete blind spot. Now, normally when we're looking at something, this isn't an issue because things don't appear in the exact center position of both eyes at the same time, because that stereoscopic vision offset. But it can be a problem if, for instance, there's something blocking one eye or the other, like you're standing behind a pole and like one eye can see it and one eye can't. It can make things in the very center of your vision be completely invisible to you. All right, and that is your central blind spot. Yep. Basically said all those things. Now, that brings us to this block system scan. I feel like this is... no, it does apply to the 107 drone flying, because you do need to be scanning the air for full-scale traffic, because if there's any traffic, it is your responsibility to see and avoid that traffic. Now, the most effective way to scan the sky for traffic is using the block system scan, which means that we divide the sky into small sections. Like, think 10-degree windows, 10 degree, 10 degree, 10 degree, 10 degree. So you pick a 10-degree window and you scan that area. Look that way, look up and down, scan it. Okay, go to the next one. Look at it, look up and down, look all over it, and go to the next one. And that is the block scan system. There are definitely written exam questions having to do with the block system scan, as well as atmospheric conditions on visibility. Haze and flight over open water, or anytime there's an unobstructed horizon, it can make it really hard to see distant objects because your eyes have a tendency in that situation to focus at a comfortable distance. Because there's nothing for your eyes to focus on, your eyes will just revert to focusing somewhere between 10 to 30 feet ahead of you, which means that a plane a mile out, you're not going to be focused on, and it can be really hard to see it. So the best way to fight that is to repeatedly focus on something as far away as possible. It says here that, it could be the wingtip, but, we don't have a wingtip because we're standing on the ground. So focus on a distant tree. If it's a clear day or a hazy day and you're like trying to look for traffic or fly line of sight or something, it can be beneficial to focus on something far away and then look back to what you're looking at. All right. And this gets us to what I consider some of the meat and potatoes of tonight's stream. Now we're getting into aeronautical decision making. Aeronautical decision making is a systematic approach to the mental process used by pilots to consistently determine the best course of action and respond to a given set of circumstances. Any PIC, whether it's full scale or drones, is going to use many different sources to safely operate, and you need to be able to manage all of these resources effectively. Which brings us to crew resource management. Crew resource management is just a concept of using all available resources the most effectively in order to safely conduct whatever operation it is. Now, a lot of people, I was just talking to a friend of mine at the airlines the other day about how I was doing a crew resource management thing for drones, and they're like, what are you even talking about? You don't have crews? Now, technically we do, because we operate with visual observers. You could have a person operating the controls that isn't the PIC, so we do have crews. But even if you were to be operating your drone alone, the concepts of crew resource management apply, because you have many things that are available to you, not just you. Like it could even be like a spouse that's there watching with you. It's just making use of every available resource to the best way possible in order to safely conduct the operation. All right. Now we're going to get into some of this other stuff. One of the things that's important with crew resource management is communication procedures. Ensuring that you have a procedure to communicate with all of the members of the crew. It could be that your visual observer isn't located in your physical location. There was an episode of Rotor Riot that we did on this where we used a physical observer in a vehicle that I was chasing that was over a mile away. And but we maintained a phone call so that I had proper communication with that with the vehicle and my visual observer. Oh yeah. Communication methods. I guess the communication procedures and methods is a little bit different. I kind of jumped the shark there. The communicational procedures would be to make it clear, if you're using a visual observer, that, hey, if anybody walks into the park, I want you to let me know. We're going to say that if they walk in on this side, that they're walking in on the statue side. We're going to say if they walk in on this side, that they're walking in on the, I don't know, sunset side. Being clear with the communication that you're going to be using in this environment. That way you know that when you're flying, if your observer tells you there's a person by the fountain, you know that it's the fountain. I mean, obviously it's a fountain, but you get the idea. You just need to have an agreed upon set of communication procedures. All right. Thanks, Nephron. All right, moving on. So communication methods, that's kind of, I jumped the shark and I was talking about using a phone. You could be using two-way radio communication. You could be using, obviously we're not going to be using hand signals if we're using FPV goggles. It's just not a good method for communicating. But you could be using radios, you could be using cell phones. The important thing is that you establish a way to maintain a proper communication throughout the operation. And have a procedure in place so that if that communication fails, you both are aware of what it is that you're going to do. Like when we were doing the shoot with Rotor Riot, I said, hey, if for some reason the call drops or whatever, I'm just going to bail, I'm going to abandon, and I'm going to come back to base, and we'll regroup from there. So not only creating communication methods that are reliable, but kind of having a bug out plan in place so that if this fails, you know what it is that you're going to do. All right. Task management. This is another aspect of crew resource management. Now, tasks can vary on complexity of the operation, etc., and depending on the area of operations. And so sometimes just based off of the tasks, it may be necessary to have additional crew members. You could be doing some kind of operation where you have so much going on to be concerned with that that you need more than one visual observer. You could be operating where you're going behind line of sight from your current operating position so that you would have a visual observer where you're at, a visual observer on the opposite side of this building, a visual observer in a vehicle that you're chasing, and you need to maintain everybody's tasks accordingly. You, as the operation complexity ramps up, you may even need to think about having a PIC that's different from the operator that controls, so that that person can communicate with all of these observers and the person manipulating the controls and kind of oversee the entirety of the operation. These are just things to keep in mind because you want to make sure that none of the members of the crew are getting task saturated, meaning that they've got too many things going on and they're not able to fully function. And recognizing that task saturation is a really important thing. If you see somebody that's struggling to keep up, whether it's your person operating the controls, with FPV, we have mostly pretty simple operations, but these are just things to be concerned with. And if you're a crew member on an operation, don't be afraid to speak up and if somebody asks you to do something like, hey, look over here, do this, to be like, you know what, I can't right now, I've got too much going on. This is it. So keep on going. All right, next up, other resources. Take advantage of information that the FAA is putting out there. This could be weather briefings, your METARs, your TAFs, your prognostic charts, etc. Take advantage of air traffic control if you're operating in an environment with a lot of full-scale aircraft. Being in communication with that air traffic control could be a great thing. Landowners, like the building managers, if you're, flying drones in a mall or something to get for some promo, working with the building managers could be a big thing. Just use all available resources to safely operate is the baseline that we're talking about here. Don't be afraid to take advantage. All right. Now, moving into some other stuff, hazards and risks. One of the big things about aeronautical decision making is properly managing hazards and risks. So we need to define these two things. Now, hazard is a real or perceived event, condition, or circumstance that a pilot encounters. When you're faced with a hazard, you make an assessment of that hazard based on various factors and then assign a value to the potential impact of the hazard. Now, that potential impact is then the risk. So for instance, a hazard could be a frayed battery strap. A hazard could be splintered carbon fiber. A hazard could be, the first indication that your arm is about to break on the drone. All of those are going to be hazards. The risk is once we evaluate that hazard. Whoa, skipped a couple. Once we evaluate a hazard and determine how much of a risk it is to our operation, that's when it becomes a risk. So, therefore, risk is an assessment of the single or cumulative hazards facing a pilot during an operation. Now, different pilots are going to see hazards differently. Now, this is just a little graphic of the risk management process. We start off, and it mimics very closely some other of these things that we're going to talk about. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. First of all, we're going to identify the hazard. Then we're going to assess the risk, analyze the controls, make a decision, use those controls, and monitor the results. For instance, with my battery strap frayed, be like, identify the hazard. The battery strap is frayed. How dangerous is it? Is it so frayed that it could come loose in like a hard flip or roll? That's us assessing the risk from this hazard. If it's just barely got a little nick in it from the prop and you're like, it's out of the way, there's no way that it's gonna be an issue during this flight, then you've assessed it to be very small. Analyze the controls. What things can we do to mitigate this risk? You could replace the battery strap if it's frayed enough. Make a control decision. Do we take action on that control and replace the battery strap? Then use the control. That would be the actual replacing the battery strap, and then monitoring the results. Yep, that new strap looks good. That would be an example of taking it from a hazard to a risk to analyzing the controls and monitoring it. All right. All right, moving on. Next, risk management. The goal of risk management is to proactively identify safety-related hazards and mitigate the associated risks. Risk management is an important component of ADM, and when a pilot follows good decision-making practices, the inherent risk in a flight is reduced or even eliminated. Now, the ability to make good decisions is based on direct or indirect experience and education. One of the things I want to touch on really quickly is that different pilots will see hazards differently. Like somebody that's completely new might have the smallest of nick in their battery strap. I'm just going to keep using the same example for now and be like, oh my God, this is a dangerous situation, and replace it right away. Whereas I've been flying for a long time. I personally use 2 battery straps. And if one of them has a little bit of a nick because, it got hit by a prop in a crash, and I'm like, well, that's not going to break unless I have a really hard crash. And even if I do break it, I've got a second battery strap that's going to be fine. I may decide that that's an acceptable hazard to continue the operation, whereas someone new might decide that that is unacceptable. So, all right. Principles of risk management. Don't accept any unnecessary risk. If it's there's always going to be risks involved in every flight. The important thing is that you don't take risks that aren't necessary. If you are, I'm trying to think of a good example. if you can do the job, whether it's for a client chasing drift cars, for example, and they want a shot of it going around a right-hand turn, and they're like, fly around this turn here. And you're like, well, that's going to put me really close to the audience, but there's the same turn over here. Can we do that? Well, that was obviously an unnecessary risk to do it on this turn versus that turn. If all you had to do is say, well, look, that's going to put me flying over the crowd. Why don't we do it over here? If they're okay with that, then you've mitigated the risk that way. Make risk decisions at the appropriate level. Risk decisions should be made by the person who can develop and implement risk controls. That's basically just saying, don't try to do things that are out of your control. Don't obviously you can't decide if the drifting of the car is going to endanger the crowd. That's not your problem. That's a problem for the driver and for the thing. But deciding whether or not you fly really close to that crowd, that's a risk that you have the ability to make a decision on. Accept risk when the benefits outweigh dangers. Just like we were saying before, there are always going to be risks associated with flying. It's important to recognize those risks and to decide what is acceptable. I've talked about this a lot in my vlogs and stuff about looking at things as a risk versus reward, where I recognize that, you know what, maybe diving down the side of a building has some inherent risks in it, but because we've decided to do it on Thanksgiving and are operating when there's no pedestrians around, we've mitigated as many of the risks as possible, and the reward is high enough that I'm willing to go and do it. So it's just an important thing of taking acceptable levels of risks. And always integrate risk management into planning at all levels. Just because for instance, if you are working on that same drift car footage, maybe they really want you to be on that turn because there's some feature that they want a shot of. If you're working this in the planning stages as well, it might be the sort of thing where they can move the crowd back a few feet, etc. So, always be integrating these risk management principles into all of your levels of planning. Like maybe it comes up in the first meeting with the people way before the event ever happens. All right. I agree. It is a lot of common sense, but common sense is not that common. All right. All right, so assessing risk. For single pilot, assessing risk is not as simple as it sounds. For example, the pilot acts on his or her own quality control in making decisions. Well, just like we were talking about before, if you're fatigued and if you ask a fatigued pilot that's flown for 16 hours, hey, are you too tired to keep going? They might say, no, I'm good. But are they really in a state where they can make that kind of judgment? Basically, just be aware of your mental state and your mental ability to be assessing these risks. Now, I think that this is a really good thing. We're going to talk about a couple of things. So first of all, we have guidelines for assessing risk. Now, this is, I'm being reductive. These guidelines for assessing risk, you have probable, an event's likely to occur several times during the operation. Occasional, it will probably occur at some point. Remote. It's unlikely to occur, but possible and improbable. This is just speaking to the likelihood of this risk being a reality. In the event of our battery strap, there was a nick on it. That was a hazard. The risk was that the battery strap breaks in flight. How likely is it? Well, that all depends on how deep it is, and that depends on our experience with how we assess this risk. Now, then we talk about the severity of the event. If this risk were to come to fruition, how bad is it going to be? Well, in the case of a battery strap, if it came off, I wouldn't say it's negligible because it's more than a minor system damage. We could have a complete loss of the craft for operating over water. It just depends on the operation. Marginal, it could result in minor injury or minor damage for sure. Critical, it's not going to likely be major damage or severe injury or catastrophic, fatalities or total loss. I guess catastrophic would be true if you're operating over water because that's a total loss of the craft, but we're splitting hairs. But that brings us to this risk assessment matrix. And I feel like this is a really handy thing. If you look at the likelihood of the event occurring and then the severity of the outcome of the event, and along this matrix, things that are catastrophic but negligible, that might be an acceptable risk. Or, sorry, catastrophic but improbable. We're at the medium level. Would I take a risk that would be catastrophic in the worst sense, but extremely improbable that it would happen? Yeah, I think that's acceptable. To me, anything that falls in the low, I'm doing it. If it falls in the medium, probably still going to be doing it for myself, assuming that there is a payoff. I'm not going to do something in the medium range where there is no reward whatsoever. Once we get into the serious, it starts to get a little bit like more hard to decide. I think that if the severity is marginal, but it's probable that the thing is going to fail, I think that that's sort of like, to me, that's like me trying the power loop over and over and over. It's probable that I'm going to fail. It's probable that I'm going to cause some damage to the craft, but it's highly unlikely that I'm going to hurt anybody because we're watching the area. And so it falls into this serious range, but I will keep doing it over and over and over because the severity is low enough. You get the idea. It's a good way to assess risk. All right. This brings us to the hazardous attitudes. And if you're going to be taking your Part 107, pay attention to this crap. I think that this is one of the most boring, and I'm not going to talk too negatively. It is extremely useful because there will almost certainly be questions on your written exam having to do with the 5 hazardous attitudes. Now, these hazardous attitudes can affect your fitness to fly because they can cause you to make poor decisions. So, being fit to fly is more than just your physical condition and recent experience. These attitudes can highly affect that ability. Now, the 5 hazardous attitudes are anti-authority, impulsivity, invulnerability, macho, and resignation. Just remember these guys. This is pretty much the questions that they will ask you. I've got as example questions at the end of this presentation, so that you see it. They're pretty straightforward. The things that you need to know is basically the antidote, right? And the questions will be multiple choice, and we'll have the correct antidote and a bunch of wrong antidotes. And just if you can use logic to resolve would be the antidote to a given bad hazardous attitude, then you're there. So anti-authority, don't tell me. This attitude is found in people who don't like anyone telling them what to do. In a sense, they're saying no one can tell me what to do, and they may be resentful of having someone tell them what to do. Antidote is this saying: follow the rules. They are usually right. All right. Impulsivity, doing it too fast. That's the guy that's just like, man, I got to get this done. I got to do it. Got to go. We got to get this done. The antidote for this is not so fast. Think first. Invulnerability. It won't happen to me. I'm special. Blah, blah, blah. The rules don't apply to me. The antidote, it could happen to me. All right. And macho. I can do it. This one I think applies to I've not known a pilot that this doesn't apply to, whether we're talking full scale or drones. Pilots are always trying to prove that they are better than anyone else. I can do it. I'll show them. I'll do a reverse power loop with the radio behind my back. The antidote to this is taking chances is foolish. All right. Resignation. This is one that I feel like it's a thing in this, but I have not seen many pilots that are of resignation. Pilots in general, whether we're talking again full scale or remote pilots, have a tendency to be all about control and alpha male mentality, where it's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it this way. This is the way that I'm gonna fix it. It seems like a much less often hazardous attitude. But it's the guy that's just like, what's the use? Nothing I do is going to matter anyway. Blah, 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 blah. But if you have that attitude, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're not adequately analyzing the risks and making proper decisions. So the antidote for this one is I'm not helpless. I can make a difference. All right. Now this brings us to mitigating risk. Mitigating risks is that's just a fancy way of saying how we are going to go about reducing the risk. A lot of mitigating risk is just effectively identifying the risk and making a decision about how to reduce the risk. Maybe we take a look at a situation and decide, you know what, I'm fatigued, but I can go take a nap and I'm going to be good to go in 30 minutes and we can do this operation. Or, you know, you're looking at the risks and coming up with a solution and implementing that solution. So, first of all, with mitigating risk, there's going to be a lot of checklists, a lot of acronyms, but this is aviation, and we use a lot of acronyms and checklists. I'm Safe is like the go-to checklist for self-analyzation. This is just a quick rundown of things to think about in your own current mental and physical state, and to assess how much of a risk you are to the operation. So the I, illness. Am I sick? You know, maybe you've got a little bit of a cold, but you're probably still okay to go fly. These are cumulative. All of these things could add up to a situation where you're not fit to fly. Like you might fail on one or more, and maybe one of them is enough, like alcohol. That would be enough to fail you on the whole thing. But it's going to go illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, or emotion. Emotion, you can have an emotional situation that is going to cause you to be unfit for flight. If you just found out that a very close loved one had passed away, that can put you in a state where you would not be able to safely operate aircraft. All right. Pave checklist. So another way to mitigate risk is to perceive hazards. Incorporating the Pave checklist into pre-flight planning, the pilot divides the risk of flight into 4 categories. 4 categories are pilot in command, aircraft, environment, and external pressures. Now, the Pave checklist, we can use the I'm Safe as a part of that Pave checklist. Obviously, the P in Pave is for pilot in command. And to analyze a pilot in command, we can use the I'm Safe checklist. All right. Pave, P, pilot in command. Pilot is one of the risk factors to the flight, and you've got to ask yourself, am I ready for this trip? Blah, blah, blah. See, I'm Safe checklist provides the answers. Aircraft. Is the aircraft the right aircraft for the flight? Are you familiar with it? Is it something that you've tested? Maybe the only thing that you've got flying this day is, you know, a fresh build. Is that the best idea? I don't know. It might not be the best idea. Or maybe this quad has been having an issue with the video system. Maybe that's not the best craft. Is the aircraft has the right equipment for the flight? You know, sometimes it might be that you need a tiny whoop for a thing, or you might need a ducted, like a cinewhoop in order to chase because you're going to be operating too close to performers, etc. It just, you know, think about different aspects of the aircraft. Maybe, you know, we talked in previous streams about proper maintenance, etc. Yeah, look at the aircraft. V is for environment. These are going to be your weather, terrain, airspace, time of day or night, etc. The environment can have its own risks built in as well. And E is for external pressures. A client, the pilot doesn't want to disappoint. Desire to demonstrate your pilot qualifications. Basically anything that there are any number of external pressures that can be exerted on you in a given situation, and just be aware of those and how they ratchet up the risk of any given operation. All right. Another checklist. I feel like these get kind of burdensome just talking about them, but there are definitely questions on both the Pave, CARE, and I'm Safe checklists on the written exam. So we go over it. In the second step, the goal is to process this information to determine whether the identified hazards constitute a risk, which is defined as the future impact of a hazard that is not controlled or eliminated. Yeah, you can mitigate risks, etc., make it less likely, all of these things. But the care, why do you have to care about it? What are the consequences of that risk? What are the alternatives? Maybe you could go operate on a different day, wait until the morning, reschedule the meeting, or drive. Well, okay, drive should not be in here because that's going to the full scale stuff, but you get the idea. Reality, dangers and distraction of fatigue could lead to and external pressures. Again, with the external pressures. Basically, your care checklist is another way to analyze risks and evaluate them. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Team checklist. Choose and implement risk controls. Once you've perceived a hazard and processed its impact on flight safety, step 2, our care, it's time to move on to this third step, perform. Perform risk management by using the team checklist of transfer, eliminate, accept, mitigate. So these are basically ways to eliminate that risk that we've determined is inaccessible. Transfer. Somehow, can you transfer the risk on to another person? Maybe by getting another visual observer, someone who can, maybe you have a visual observer whose job it is to make sure nobody walks past this point when we're operating. So you're giving them an extra task to make sure that there are no people in the area of operation. Eliminate. Is there a way to eliminate the hazard? For a battery strap scenario, that would be to replace the battery strap. Maybe we just accept the risk because the benefits are outweighing the cost. Or maybe we can mitigate it if it's something that we can make a less likely to happen, etc. Oh my goodness. The comments are a lot. Why is this a paid chat? Because it's a long story. I'm not even going to worry about all that. We talked about that at the beginning of the stream. All right. This is one that I like a lot, is the decide method. Aeronautical decision making with the decide method. This is, it goes back to the same risk assessment thing, or it's very similar to that original risk assessment. First of all, we detect the problem, estimate the need to react, choose a course of action, identify solutions, do the necessary actions, and evaluate the effect of the action. So we were using the risk assessment tool earlier, but this would be more of in flight. So we're flying along and we've hit a tree. Let's say that. We bounce off a tree and we need to decide, do I need to land or can I keep going? Because we've detected a problem. We've hit a tree. So maybe we need to estimate the need to react. Well, I'll do a flyby. I'll fly by and see how it sounds. So you fly by and everything sounds good. It sounds like completely fresh props. So we've estimated that there's no need to react. So therefore, no course of action is necessary. Move on. But if we fly by and it sounds like, then okay, there's a need to react. So what's the course of action? Maybe we just fly like another 10 seconds because it wasn't that bad and the battery's almost over. Or maybe it was the beginning of a flight and it sounds really, really bad. And so we decide, all right, the course of action is to replace the prop. So we've identified the solution, replacing the prop. So now you land, replace the prop, and then take off. And we make sure, hey, does it still sound as bad? If it doesn't sound as bad, then it was definitely the bent prop. If it still sounds awful, then maybe we have a problem with the motor. You get the idea. This is how the decide method works. Now, there's a couple of different differences. There's two types of the decide method. Number one, we have the analytical, which is what we just described. We worked through this in an analytical manner. We detected, we evaluated the event, looked at the risk, the hazard, potential outcomes, like what's going to happen. Maybe I smoke a motor because of it. And determined what our desired outcome is and thought about some possible solutions and decided what the best action is, and then looked at the effect on that decision and decided, all right, does the situation still have the same problem? No, we fixed it, so then we're done. Or yes, the problem still exists, so you go back to the beginning. Now there's also the automatic or naturalistic decide method. Now this is the sort of thing that happens in an emergency situation. You run through it, you detect the problem, you evaluate the risk really quickly and have a desired outcome, and you just take the action. You don't sit there and think about all the different possibles. You're like, you know what, this is it, that's the best thing I can think of, we're going and we're doing it. That's automatic, and that's just reactionary that you would be doing in an emergency situation. All right. I think we're getting close to the end here. 65. Yeah, we got just like 5 or 6 more slides, and then we are at the sample questions for tonight. So situational awareness is the accurate perception and understanding of all the factors and conditions within the 5 fundamental risk elements: flight, pilot, aircraft, and environment, and type of operation. I don't think that's M is supposed to be there. I'm going to fix that right now. There, fixed it. Workload management. Effective workload management ensures that essential operations are accomplished by planning, prioritization, sequencing tasks to avoid work overload. As experience is gained, a pilot learns to recognize future workload requirements and can prepare for high workload periods during times of low workload. All right. Oh, dang, we were like super close to the to the questions. So here we have just some general, these are all sample questions. These are all actual questions that you could end up with on your Part 107 test. Now, at the end of this, I'll also mention a website where you can go and get a lot more practice questions to go through. These are just some that I went and identified as having to do with the material from tonight's stream and going over it. Now, real quick, anybody in the voice chat here have any questions based on anything I talked about so far? Guessing not. So if you do, feel free to pop in and please help me with the answering of the questions. Anybody in the YouTube chat got any questions based off of any of this? Apologies for the lack of attention to all of the comments up until now. It's just for teaching the 107 stuff. There's so much stuff to get through and to think about, and I can't like keep... I do a very poor job of multitasking, and to try to answer questions like on the fly while I'm making it through all of the material is a little bit much for me. All right. If nobody pops, I'm going to be paying attention to the questions on the comments section for now as we go through these questions here. So let's just dive right into some of these sample questions. So safety is an important element for a remote pilot to consider prior to operating an unmanned aircraft system. To prevent the final link in the accident chain, a remote pilot must consider which methodology? Anybody got a guess? Risk management. So, yeah, safety management system is something more along the lines of airlines things going. I feel like this is kind of to prevent that final link in the accident chain. That's saying that, referring to the fact that most aviation accidents are not the cause of one failure. It's usually a series of cascading problems. And the best way to prevent the final link in that cascade of problems is to properly manage the risks and to decide what's too high of a risk and what's an acceptable risk. All right. All right, Red October has a good question. How would you evaluate the risk of something that you feel confident in but carries high severity of undesired results? That would go back to that risk assessment matrix is what I would use, because you're saying specifically that the severity is high. So it would be, I don't know, maybe you joined us late. I'll just scroll back here to the little grid. Boom. So our severity, as you said, is high, meaning it would be a catastrophically bad thing, but that you feel carries... you're going to mitigate the risk in every possible way that you can in order to make it as unlikely as possible. If there is a possibility of something catastrophic happening based off of the type of operation that either you want to do or somebody is asking you to do, if you can find ways to make it less likely to happen, like for instance, they want you to fly down this walkway in a subway. Well, I would say that a catastrophic thing could happen of somebody being standing there and you smacking them in the face. That would be catastrophic. Well, the way that you're going to mitigate that is by making it less likely to hit somebody in the face, maybe by making sure that nobody is in the subway when you do the operation. I know that that's just getting really generic, but without a more specifics on the question, it's kind of hard to make it more specific in my answer. All right, back to our pop quiz. Where are we at? Quizzes, so many questions. Okay, second question. When adapting crew resource management concept to the operation of a small unmanned aircraft, CRM must be integrated into, anybody got a guess? I realize that the video feed is behind the actual thing. Is there even anybody on the voice chat at this point? We do have people on voice chat. Okay, good. You want to incorporate it into all phases of the operation. Oops. That was unclimactic because I was not focused on the right app to move on. Next up, identify the hazardous attitude or characteristics a remote pilot displays while taking risks in order to impress others. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of sample questions tonight about these hazardous attitudes because there are just a lot of questions in general. I guarantee you're going to get one or more questions about hazardous attitudes on your written exam. So identify the hazardous attitude or characteristic a remote pilot displays while taking risks in order to impress others. Macho. This is clearly the macho. Somebody that's like, oh, showing off. It's a common problem amongst aviation types. And next up, you've been hired as a remote pilot by a local TV station to film breaking news with a small unmanned aircraft. You expressed a safety concern and the station manager has instructed you to fly first, ask questions later. What type of hazardous attitude does this attitude represent? I would say that is the impulsivity. There is an argument to be made of that being invulnerability, but then you're just interpreting the person's attitude. But the fly first, ask questions later, impulsivity. Boom. Got it. All right. You are a remote pilot for a co-op energy service provider. You are to use your unmanned aircraft to inspect power lines in the remote area 15 hours away from your home office. After the drive, the fatigue impacts your abilities to complete your assignment on time. Fatigue can be recognized. It's not easily recognized, so that's not right. It can be recognized as being in an impaired state. I like that one. And by an inability to overcome sleep deprivation. Not exactly. You can overcome sleep deprivation by getting rest. So I'm going to say as being an impaired state. Got it. Oh, we actually got some possible answers. All right. Next up. Which is true regarding the presence of alcohol within the human body? A small amount of alcohol increases vision acuity. Definitely not. B, consuming an equal amount of water will increase the destruction of alcohol and alleviate a hangover. Not true. Anybody that's drank can state that. Judgment and decision-making abilities can be adversely affected by even small amounts of alcohol. That is definitely true. Click the wrong button. Boom. C is our answer. The effective use of all available resources, human, hardware, and information prior to and during flight to ensure the successful outcome of the operation is called crew resource management. Boom. B. Unfortunately, the delays in YouTube make it hard for me to even guess which question you guys are answering. I gotta like watch the stream and yeah, whatever. Doing my best. All right. And rapid or extra deep breathing while using oxygen can cause a condition known as hyperventilation. A. Which would most likely result in hyperventilation? Emotional tension, anxiety, or fear, excessive consumption of alcohol, an extremely slow rate of breathing, and insufficient oxygen. Well, C is wrong because hyperventilation is fast rate of breathing, and B is wrong because alcohol has nothing to do with hyperventilation, so it's definitely A. Uh-huh. All right. What is the antidote when a pilot has a hazardous attitude, such as anti-authority? So this is kind of getting to the common sense thing that I was talking about. Anti-authority is the person who like doesn't want to follow the rules, doesn't want to follow the rules, period. So rules do not apply in this situation. Well, that's not going to solve an anti-authority attitude. So it's definitely not that. I know what I'm doing. That's just going to feed into an anti-authority. C, follow the rules. That is obviously the antidote for that hazardous attitude. C. Boom. What is the antidote when a pilot has a hazardous attitude, such as impulsivity? So impulsivity is, just do it now. Quick. So it could happen to me. That is an antidote to a different one, the invulnerability, not impulsivity. Do it quickly to get it over with. That is not correct because that is just making the hazardous attitude worse. The antidote is C, not so fast, think first. Boom. All right. What is the antidote when a pilot has a hazardous attitude such as invulnerability? It will not happen to me. That is the definition of the hazardous attitude, so that's not the antidote. It cannot be that bad. Also not going to help the situation. So obvious answer is C, it could happen to me, because that is the antidote to that hazardous attitude. Yeah, we're looking for the antidote, not the definition of it. That's another thing to keep in mind when you're doing these written test questions, guys, is to make sure that you thoroughly read the question and understand what it's asking. It can be really easy to jump to conclusions. That's just good test taking technique, is to a thorough reading of the question and the possible answers to make sure that you understand what it is that's being asked. All right. Risk management as part of the aeronautical decision-making process relies on which features to reduce the risks associated with each flight. Application of stress management and risk element procedures, situational awareness, problem recognition, and good judgment. The mental process of analyzing all information in a particular situation and making a timely decision on what action to take. I like B and C. Hang on, let's read the question again. Risk management as part of the aeronautical decision-making process relies on which features to reduce the risks associated with each flight. B, because we have to recognize the hazard. We have to be situationally aware. Man, I think it actually might be C. Nope, I was right. It's B. Good. I was overthinking that one. All right. A pilot experiencing the effects of hyperventilation should be able to restore proper carbon dioxide levels in the body by slowing the breathing rate, breathing into a paper bag, or talking aloud. That is clearly the right answer. I'm not even going to read the other two. Yeah, breathing spontaneously and deeply or gaining mental control of the situation, not going to help. Increasing the breathing rate, that's completely the wrong thing. You got to slow your breathing rate, breathe into a paper bag, talk aloud. A. All right. Which category of Pave can cause pilots to ignore all the other risks? I included this question because I feel like it's one of the most counterintuitive of the things. Because for me, when I think about it, the one that can cause you to ignore all the other risks is the pilot. If the pilot isn't, if you're fatigued, you're not going to do a good job analyzing the risks. But that's the wrong answer to this question. The external pressures of the flight is the correct answer. Now, I can see how external pressures could also cause you to ignore all the other if you've got a client or a boss that's breathing down your neck. But just this is one of the examples. I go over several examples during the course of this where I'm just like, this is one of those questions where you just have to memorize it. And this is one that you just need to memorize. Which category of PAVE can cause pilots to ignore all the other risk categories? The correct answer is external pressures of the flight. Yeah. Yeah, I just don't like that question because I feel like the pilot... Oh, yeah. And we have reached the end. These are things that I had built slides for, but you don't actually have to know for 107, like hypoxia, because you're on the ground. Now, I did mention earlier in the stream that at the end I would talk about great places where you can find a lot more resources. If you want to do some practice questions on your own, the place that I like to do that is at the King Schools. You can find that at kingschools.com/free FAA exam, and then you can select which test. The reason that I like to use the King Schools is because they have a breakdown of the various sections. So if you wanted to just focus on weather questions, you can select only weather or regulations, etc., and just do those questions that are pertaining to you. So this is kind of where I like to go to do a lot of the practice questions. Dude, what up, bot grinder? You missed all of the information. Total fail. You know, I remember you were saying that you were interested in... I need to get you access to all of the streams because I told you that I would, and I don't think that I have properly done that. But anyways, heads up, guys, at 10 p.m. in just 40 minutes, me and Bot Grinder are going to be playing some Call of Duty live on Bot's new streaming channel. I think that my PC might actually even be capable of streaming Call of Duty, but I'm not going to push it tonight and test it. I did a ton of... I've had so many problems with that thing crashing, but it's finally fixed. Scooter FPV, thank you so much for that super chat, dude. Big fist bump. Let's go through and just do... I'm going to throw in right now all of the different categories, and Bot with the $10 about to get that 107. Hell yeah, bro. I'm going to throw in, and because we have gone through all of the sections now with the Part 107 stream people. Now, granted, all of you guys across all of YouTube haven't had access to all of the streams, so you might not have... We've not covered it lecture-wise. If you want access to all of the lectures where I teach everybody about how to read METARs and TAFs, how, you know, basic weather knowledge, like what is a thunderstorm, etc. Like I go through all of this stuff, guys, in those streams. You can get access to that over at Patreon, link in the description. But let's do a few questions right now, just so that, and I'll do a little bit of explaining on, and before I end it, because I kind of got through the stream material a lot faster tonight than anticipated. Most of this, I try to aim it to be like a 2-hour thing between the lecture part and then the sample questions. I can tweak it a little. All right. Steady precipitation preceding a front is an indication of... I'm just reading it. Stratiform clouds with moderate turbulence, cumuliform clouds with little or no turbulence, stratiform clouds with little or no turbulence. So the cumuliform cloud is like a bunch of puffy clouds. So steady precipitation would not correlate with cumuliform cloud. It's going to be stratiform. That is just a like overcast layer. So we'll pair up with that steady precipitation. Now, preceding a front, you're going to have... the answer is C, with little or no turbulence. Yeah. I feel like that's one that I overthink all the time, and I want to say that it's moderate turbulence, but it's not. So I'm going to go with my experience and say C. I may be wrong. Refer to figure. Which runway and traffic pattern should be used by the wind cone in the segmented circle? So this is going back to all of our traffic patterns. Basically, a traffic pattern is a rectangle that you fly. You take off, you're on upwind, then you turn either left or right, and you're on crosswind, then you turn and you're on downwind, and then you turn and you're on base. But basically, you make either all left or all right-hand turns, and this is a segmented circle that designates whether you're going to make left or right-hand turns for every given runway on the airport. And then you have the windsock indicating where the wind's coming from. So you got wind coming at yourself from the northwest. So we would either want to use the north runway, 36, or the west runway of 27. And since west isn't an option, it's only 36, it's going to have to be left-hand traffic for runway 36. These little lines show that you're going to be flying left pattern for 36 to be going into the wind on the takeoff. All right. Refer to figure 20, area 3. What is the recommended communication procedures for landing at Currituck County Airport? All right. Figure 20, area 3. So this is the figure. These numbers are just the areas here. I'm going to zoom in for y'all so you can see better. So area 3, Currituck Airport. So we know because the airport is magenta that is an uncontrolled airport, meaning that we're going to be using the procedures for an uncontrolled airport. So, and it's asking us about our recommended communications. So we don't contact flight service station, so it's neither A or B. I don't even need to know the right frequencies, although they're going to be out there, down there. You're going to transmit your intentions on 122.9 when 10 miles out and give position reports. Why is this a question for a 107? I disagree with this being a question, but it's something that you guys are going to have to know if you want to get your 107 certificate. So if you look down here, the C next to 122.9 tells you that is the CTAF frequency, or the Common Traffic Advisory frequency, and aircraft coming to land there will announce their intentions on CTAF 10 miles out. All right. What technique should a remote pilot use to scan for traffic? We talked about this tonight. A remote pilot should systematically focus on different segments of the sky for short intervals. Boom. All right. And a temperature inversion would most likely result in which weather condition? A temperature inversion is a breakdown of the standard. I've frozen. Deactivate and reactivate. And okay. A temperature inversion is a breakdown of the standard lapse rate. Normally, as you climb in altitude, the temperature decreases, but a temperature inversion could be that the lapse rate changes, meaning that it's not going as fast as it had been previously, or it could mean that you just have a stable temperature. So it's like 10, 8, 6, 6, 6, or it could be 6, 8, 10 for a short period of time. That is a temperature inversion. And whenever you have a temperature inversion, you typically have an increase in temperature as altitude increases. That is the definition of a temperature inversion. Now, whenever you have a temperature inversion, you typically have haze, fog, low-level clouds resulting in bad visibility. So that is definitely why B is not correct. A, clouds with extensive vertical development. That does not occur in the case of a temperature inversion because the normal lifting action gets stopped because the temperature of the air is not cooling off as you go up. If you watch my weather stream, you will hear all about adiabatic expansion and what that means. See, click it. There we go. Okay. An ATC radar facility issues the following advisory to a pilot flying north in calm winds. Traffic 9 o'clock, 2 miles southbound. Where should the pilot look for the traffic? It's not south. What they need to look is 9 o'clock. So the pilot is flying north. The clock is the clock hand. So 12 o'clock is straight ahead where you're headed. 3 o'clock off to the right, 6 o'clock behind you, 9 o'clock to your left. So you're flying north. You need to look 9 o'clock north. That's going to be west. Boom. All right, refer to figure 26, area 4. You have been hired to inspect the tower under construction at 46.9 north, 98.6 west near Jamestown Regional Airport. What must you receive prior to flying your unmanned aircraft in this area? All right, figure 26, area 4. So right around here. Now, real quick, it gives us the latitude and longitude. We need to know what those lines look like on the sectional chart. So you see here, this black line with all of the little hash marks, that is 47 degrees north, right? This one going north and south, that is 99 degrees west. Now we're looking for 46.9, so just below that east-west running line, and 98.6 west. So this is 99, this is 98, this is 98.5, right? So it should be just on this side of that and just below this in this area 4. So 46.9, it is south of it, right? 98.6. So we're looking at this tower right here. And this tower falls inside of the magenta dashed line. Does anyone in the voice chat remember the... Anybody in the voice chat remember what the magenta dash line indicates? That magenta dash line indicates that there is no class Golf, meaning the class Echo comes all the way to the surface. Normally, you have class Golf that is from the surface to 1,200 feet AGL. Inside of this magenta shaded area, the class Golf only goes from the surface to 700 feet AGL. And then you have class Echo. And inside of the magenta dash line, class Echo comes all the way down to the surface. Now, we need permission to fly in class Echo that is associated with an airport. So you're going to need to get authorization from ATC in order to fly there. All right. While operating your SUAS to do aerial photography, you have a flyaway that causes $700 worth of property damage. How many days, within how many days must you report this accident? Oh man, this one's testing like my memory. It's been a long time since we did these. I'm pretty sure that it is. Does anybody want to help me in chat? Please tell me if you remember this, because, all right. I can tell you right now that it does require reporting. $700 worth of property damage is enough to trigger it. Anything over $500 is enough to require reporting to the FAA. You can make these reports at FAAdronezone.faa.gov. And I want to say that it is 10 days. We're going to go with 10 days on this. 4 forces acting on a plane. When are they in equilibrium? That is the gravity, lift, thrust, and drag. And it is going to be in unaccelerated flight. Boom. Refer to figure 50. Another segmented circle question. All right. The segmented circle indicates that the airport traffic is left hand for 36. So let me zoom out so y'all can see this a little bit easier. Runway 36 is the one going north. Because the little squares go this way, that means we're making left-hand turns all the way around the traffic pattern. So that's true. Left hand for 36. Right hand for 18. 18 goes this way and right. So A is actually correct. Left hand for 18, that's wrong, because to land south, you'd have to make right-hand turns to follow these arrows. Right hand for runway 9. Runway 9 is going to the east. That's left-hand turns, so that is also incorrect. All right, come on, 100%. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Woo! All right, and we got 100% on that one. And these are some examples. You know what? We'll do 10 more. Why not? I'm going to do 10 more questions, but I am going to run and grab some more water. I'm getting parched, and my tongue's getting tired from all the talking. I'll be right back. You guys read the first question and have an answer when I come back. And I changed my mind. I got a beer. I'm pre-gaming for that Call of Duty stream going down in 20 minutes. Can you explain that why again? Drone Acaria. The why is it has so many whys. The segmented circle that is shown there is what is on a field, an untowered field. It's kind of an old thing. These days, mostly you're going to use a sectional chart or the chart supplements to know the traffic patterns for the various runways. But back in the olden days, they used to lay out these white stones that indicate the runways that you have and whether or not you fly left or right-hand traffic patterns. A traffic pattern is a rectangle that everybody flies around. And if you want a lot more detail, then sign up for the Patreon, and there's a whole stream about airport operations, radio communications, where I go in depth on all of the whys of that. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that because there's a lot. All right. Anyways, refer to figure 19. Oh wait, I'm not clear. I do this all the time. So I've got two monitors. Over here is just what the thing is capturing, and then I got OBS right here. And I read off of the OBS screen, but sometimes my pointer will be on OBS, and I'll try to click on something like figure 19 to open it, and it does nothing. I gotta get my cursor over to the other screen. It's so confusing. That struggles of a streamer. Refer to figure 19. The enclosed shaded area associated with the low pressure system over northern Utah is forecast to have, for this question, you need to know all 50 states. Well, I mean, obviously just Utah, but you got to know where Utah is. Utah is this one right here, though. And so the shaded area over northern Utah is forecast to have, inside of the green dash line, freezing level above mean sea level. So we got the freezing level is, you're going to have freezing conditions. So that tells you something. And then all of these little blue dots and dashes with the arrows, the asterisks mean that it's snow. An asterisk with a triangle means snow showers. This is snow showers to moderate snow. Three little things like that one actually is rain with the dots. That's moderate rain. So this is like snow, I would say snow showers or intermittent snow. So let's go with intermittent snow. Under which conditions may a pilot fly under VFR? See, I hate this question. This is not a question that should be on a 107 because you can't fly VFR. Yeah. So it has to do with the special airspace around the DC area. Under what conditions may a pilot fly under VFR within 60 nautical miles of the DCA VOR in Washington, D.C., only if the pilot has completed special awareness training and filed a flight plan? All right. One of those you just got to memorize. Jensen, you cannot do the 107 from Brazil. That is one of the requirements of getting your 107 is you have to be have legal status in the U.S., I believe. Let's real quick here. 14 CFR 107. I'm just going to take opportunities on the weekly. Wait, where's the ECFR site? I like that one the best. On the weekly streams to go over this, answer people's questions, etc. There's a bunch of different websites that provide all of the regulations. There we go. This is the one that I like. And here we go. So operating remote pilot certifications and requirements. that's not where it is. Hang on. Is there like an eligibility? Let's use fine. Eligibility, perfect. Subject to the following. You must be 16 years of age, be able to read, speak, or write, understand English, no physical things, pass an aeronautical. Oh. So yeah, I think that you can. I know what it was. It has to do with the registration of aircraft is the thing that has to requires things. Oh man. Okay, so yes, you can get your 107. I was completely wrong. My bad. Anyways. All right. What effect does haze have on the ability to see traffic or terrain? Haze causes the eyes to focus at infinity. That's wrong because the eyes tend to overwork in haze and do not detect relative movement. No. All traffic and terrain features appear to be further away than their actual distance. That is true. The haze causes the eyes to focus at infinity. Like, it feels right, but it's wrong. Your eyes actually focus 10 to 30 feet out ahead. All right. What initial action should a pilot take prior to entering Class C airspace? Again, this is talking about radio communication for full scale, and they're going to have to contact approach control on the appropriate frequency. Refer to figure 59, area 2. The chart shows a gray line with VR1667, all these numbers. What could this area present a hazard to the operation of a small unmanned aircraft? Figure 59, area 2. Okay, so area 2 right here. It's talking about this gray line with all of these numbers, VR1636, etc. That is a military training route, and military training routes have military aircraft conducting often low altitude operations that could be a hazard to aircraft. So, could it have hazards? Yes. The defined route provides traffic separation? No. It's a military training route from the surface up to 1,500 feet AGL, meaning they're going to be hugging the ground as they go flying along. So they could be flying as low as, like real low, from the surface up to 1,500. All right. What precautions should a remote PIC do to prevent possible in-flight emergencies when using lithium-based batteries? Follow the manufacturer's recommendation for safe battery handling. Don't allow the battery to charge until it reaches a minimum temperature of 100 degrees Celsius. That's a bad idea. And don't store the batteries in a freezer. I go into a lot of detail about proper battery handling on my section on lithium polymer. Way better than the FAA even gives guidance. I just delve into my personal knowledge base for that one on that stream. But yeah. The boundary between two different air masses is referred to as a front. After having dinner and wine, your client asks you to go outside and demonstrate the small drone's capabilities. You must not operate a small unmanned aircraft within 8 hours of consuming any alcoholic beverage. I ain't gonna be flying, just gonna be playing video games. I'm good to go. Refer to figure 22, area 2, and figure 31. What is the correct Unicom frequency to be used at Coeur d'Alene to request fuel? So Unicom frequency is short for Universal Communications. That's where things like requesting fuel would happen on the airport communications. And let's see, where are we at? Area 2, Coeur d'Alene. And the Unicom frequency is 122.8. 122.8. Boom. Got it. Also, figure 31 is this. It's the chart supplements. And it also states the Unicom frequency, which is going to be... I always have a hard time spotting this for some reason. There we go. CTAF and Unicom both are 122.8. So, refer to Figure 26, Area 1. Identify the airspace over Tomlinson Airport. All right, Figure 26, Area 1. That's Area 1. Tomlinson. That is so not Area 1. What the hell? Okay, but it's over here. So there are no magenta shading, indicating you'd have golf from the surface to 700. There's no magenta dashed. Oh, wait, what is this? Magenta dashed. That is a misleading magenta dashed. This is something that they don't really talk a whole lot about, but there are two magenta dash lines that appear on sectionals. One is a circle or a square or an enclosed box that is going to indicate that you have Class Echo airspace down to the surface. You also have these long, long lines. These are lines of magnetic deviation. The magnetic North Pole is not the same as true north or the actual like rotational north of the Earth. The Earth isn't flat. It is a sphere. The magnetic north is actually a cluster of iron ore that floats around in magma and moves over time. And every few years they have to change the magnetic deviation on these sectional charts. So this is a line of magnetic deviation. It's just telling pilots that you need to correct your magnetic compass by this many degrees in order to do proper flight planning. Because if you plot out a course on the map to go from this point to that point, you need to aim a little bit left or right in order to actually be going that based off of a magnetic compass. So, long way of explaining this answer, but the answer is the airspace over it is Class G from the surface. All right, not B, because we got only the surface up to 1,200. So it's Class G, the surface up to, but not including 1,200 feet AGL. Then Class E up to from 1,200 feet AGL up to and not including 18,000 feet. And then above 18,000, it's Class A, but they ain't even talking about that. And let's submit it. Boom. What? 80%? What did I get wrong? Okay. Continuous, intermittent. I kind of got carried away because they have a lot of... I don't like that, but the correct answer is continuous snow. The enclosed shaded area. I want to go back so I can look at this figure again. How did I get this wrong? All right. So... our enclosed and shaded area. I mean, the northernmost part of Utah is continuous snow. I think I got carried away pointing out all of the various precipitation indicators and focused on the fact that we have showers as you go further south, but that is clearly southern Utah. At that point. So that's kind of on me for just getting carried away with explaining things on the chart. That is definitely continuous snow. My bad. Yeah. Wait, I still had another one that I was wrong on? Oh, the damn one that's like doesn't have to do with drones that I'm so not like up to speed on the full scale stuff with. Again, as long as the pilot has completed special awareness training and remains clear of the SFRA. The SFRA is the Special Flight Rules Area. Yeah. Okay. That's one of those that you guys just have to memorize. And on that, we are going to call it a night. So anybody got any questions before I wrap it up for the night? We got 10 minutes before the bots live stream with Call of Duty starts that I'm going to be participating in. So if you guys want, maybe come. I don't know how it's going to work out. It's going to be fun, though. I think it's me, Bot, Corey, and Vortex, last I heard. So come and get your Call of Duty Modern Warfare fix. I'm going to be capping fools. All right, well, if nobody has any more questions, don't forget, get your Power Loop shirt. Links in the description. Sign up for Patreon. I'll be back Sunday night with another popcorn and props. Come by with your fresh videos to submit, and yeah, it's where we hang out and drink beers and watch FPV videos together and just shoot the shit and talk all the things FPV. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and yeah. If you want to do your 107, come sign up over on Patreon. Link in the description. I'm doing these streams weekly, and yeah, all good. All right, we'll catch you guys next time, though. Like, subscribe, comment. There. I think that's all the plugs.